recording.
I was waiting for you to finish your sentence.
Thanks. It's always funny how that does seem to interrupt. So just a reminder that the call is being recorded, as Conte said just a few minutes ago, and we do always place the recordings of these calls within a couple of days up on our GFAN website. So you can find the recordings there for this call and any materials or resources that are shared, as well as past calls as well you can find. So welcome everyone. Today's call, and I'm seeing a few lovely introductions and hellos in the chat, and also a happy International Women's Day for those who observe and celebrate. I know I had hoped to get up early this morning to join one of the events, but unfortunately 6 a.m. was just not in my life today. I guess I could not get out of bed. So I hope that everybody's events and celebrations are going well, and welcome to everybody on the call. So today's call is going to focus on the 3 high-level meetings. So there's high-level meetings in September on UHC, PPR, as well as TB. And many of you who have joined past GFAN calls will know that GFAN is working as the hub for civil society and communities engaging in the TB high-level meeting. And today we're joined by colleagues from CSEM, WASFA, who will be speaking about the UHC high-level meeting, as well as Courtney Howe from Stop AIDS is going to speak about some efforts on the PPR high-level meeting to have something similar and give us an update around the PPR one. And of course, our colleagues will join around the TB one as well, but you may know that we already host other calls, and there are in fact calls, I believe, tomorrow and the following day on the TB one with a little bit more detail. So just to say, really quickly that what a challenge it's going to be with these 3 high-level meetings back to back to back in September. They will be the first one will be the PPR one on the 20th, if I'm not mistaken, of September, the UHC on the 21st, and the TB one on the 22nd. And anybody who's ever been to high-level meeting week in New York knows it's chaos. And so expect multiple side events, multiple conversations, registering, attending side events and meeting up on street corners to get those tickets to allow you into the premises and so on. So hopefully through conversations like this one and other ones that are taking place to try and coordinate key messages, asks, as well as events and activities, we'll be able to make this as comprehensible as possible in September. And to start us off in May, there's actually going to be a 2-day multi-stakeholder hearing that will encompass the 3 high-level meetings, which is also a bit challenging to try and fit in the many different issues and themes that cross these three different issues. But of course, they are all related in many different ways, UHC and TB in particular, but PPR is both a health and a non-health issue, as is UHC, as is TB, from the work that was done in 2018 around multi-stakeholder engagement. So we shall see how this goes, and we'll be trying through our networks to bring in those who have been leading on this work to talk with all of us and try our best to coordinate efforts and make this, as comprehensible and seamless as possible. So we're going to start off with our colleague from MSH, Vaisva Nkwanga, who's going to speak to us a bit about the UHC one, which got underway a lot earlier than the TB and the PPR ones, having their modalities and stuff last year. So Vaisva, I'll just pass it over to you. Welcome. It's so good to see you after a long time. And just love to hear from you about the basics that we need to know, how to engage, and what's coming up next in the UHC HLM work. Over to you.
You're muted, Vaisva.
Oh, sorry. So thanks, Katie, and everybody. Good to see you again. So on the UHC side of things, we may have had an early start on things, but we actually about at the same stage in the planning as everyone else, in part because we didn't know until recently when the multi-stakeholder hearings were going to be held. And so we couldn't do very much, but we are moving forward. As you all know, the USC HLM will be held on September 21st September 2023, and this will be after the PPR one that will take place on the 20th, and then after the UHC HLM, then you have the TB HLM on the 22nd. And then most stakeholders holder hearings have also been organized in kind of like the same format, back to back like that. The HLM on UHC is co-facilitated by the Republic of Guyana and also Thailand. And those were the two that were appointed by the President of the General Assembly. And some of you know that Thailand is a very good supporter of big supporter of UHC, and we've been working very closely with them on planning for both the multi-stakeholder hearing, but also for the HLM itself. Where we are as the civil society engagement mechanism and UHC 2030 is that we have, over the past maybe 4 or 5 months, we've been trying to put together a set of requests, recommendations, kind of like key asks for the broader UHC movement, broader UHC community. And I will share more of that later, but we are at a stage where we have gone through different iterations of those key asks or the action agenda, and now we are almost ready to finalize it, and hopefully we'll launch it in later this month. But before I talk more about that, I just want to emphasize that we have the multi-stakeholder hearing that's going to happen from May 8th and 9th. It will be all the multi-stakeholder hearings for TB, for PPR, and for UHC. And once that is done, obviously, the President of the General Assembly will prepare a report that will become the basis of the negotiations on the declaration. So we are hoping for a very strong show and engagement at the multi-stakeholder hearing, making sure that the voices of civil society are represented and that they are heard in there. So it's important people start working on their statements before it's too late, and so that they can get through the process of being selected, but really making sure that we align our messaging across the 3 PPR, because the HLMs, because we are really fighting for the same thing, which is health for all. And I don't know if I should talk about the format of that. I don't, but maybe not very necessary for now, but only to say that in terms of our planning for the HLM, sorry, for the multi-stakeholder hearing engagement there, we don't have all the details. I don't have all the details right yet, but we are hoping that we can bring in some members from civil society to, really come to New York and not only, have a voice in the room, but also engage, if possible, with the missions, take advantage of their presence to engage with the country missions in New York. We're hoping to do that, obviously, in collaboration with the TB and the PPR HLM, so that, we are aligning not just the planning for the meeting, but also the messaging that we are going to be taking to these officials. And we'll also, the friends of UHC are also working on putting together a high-level side event during the multi-stakeholder hearing that will be invite only, but I'm not quite sure who will be invited or not. But once the information is available, we'll be sure to share it. And we're hoping that, if possible, we'll also have some other side events with civil society groups from all the 3 communities, so that we can have an organized approach that, we take as a group of health advocates going forward, how we coordinate our advocacy at the global level, at the regional level, at the country level, making sure it's coordinated and organized together. In terms of, now I want to switch gears and talk about some of the key messages that we're thinking about there. One of the things that we're looking at is highlighting the message that we got out of the COVID pandemic, which is that, we need universal health coverage to be in place during, before, and after the crisis hit. That was very clear in the pandemic, and making sure that, we build strong health systems that are based on a primary healthcare approach, which is what we learned in the pandemic. But we also learned that UHC goals and global health security goals are actually intertwined. You can't have one without the other. And so this is a key message we want advocates and everybody else to take to, to the multi-stakeholder hearing, to some of the regional convenings and global and also country level, that people understand the interconnectedness of UHC and health security. We also want to highlight the fact that really PHC is the most inclusive, equitable, and cost-effective way for us to deal with any health crisis in the future. So that's kind of a way we are framing and our narrative for master stakeholder hearing, but also through the HLM. And now I will talk about the action agenda that we've been working on that brings all of these things together. The action agenda, which is a set of policy recommendations and concrete milestones that we have developed over the past 4 months, really cover 8 areas. And we're hoping that once we finish it, we complete it by the end of this month, that then we will forward it to the President of the General Assembly, and then will be part of the many pieces that will go into the negotiations or the drafting of the political declaration on UHC. The agenda was developed by a diverse group, a task force that brought together about 20 representatives and more from the different constituencies of UHC 2030. And the constituencies really did mirror, the task force did try to mirror what is in the modalities resolution for the UHC, for the high-level meeting on UHC. And so you have civil society, you have member states, you have philanthropists, you have private sector, and others who were part of developing this set of recommendations. And they have been meeting like every 2 weeks, and sometime in January through February, we opened it up for public feedback, and we had that online consultation. Some of you saw in English, French, and Spanish, and we received about 840 or 830 responses that were then integrated into what the task team had put together, the framework that put together. And so, and that also was built, the task force, the framework the task force developed initially was built around the previous key ask from 2019, and also included data, the most recent data we have, and research on the state of UHC implementation at the country level. And so all of that was integrated, and the comments from online consultation into what now looks like the final document or action agenda that we're going to share with the President of the General Assembly. If you can allow me, I can pull up my screen here to show you what these 8 areas of the action agenda look like. Okay, so these are really the 8 action areas that were identified by the task force. They are very much or very similar to what we had in 2019. And the reason why that is because what we had in 2019 was really relevant to what we have seen today. Since 2019, but also we thought that, we didn't need to start from scratch. We had this in 2019. We had the political declaration from 2019. We had the studies and research that's been done, the data. So we thought we should just try to build on that framework and build it out more so than creating something from the scratch. And so it's, making sure that we have political leadership for UHC. That's a very major ask for us, but also that, we continue to put emphasis on leaving no one behind, which is really the main goal of UHC. And the third one on adopting enabling laws and regulations, we don't think that we can achieve UHC without that piece as well, and strengthening the healthcare, the health and care workforce for quality healthcare. I'll mention that this one is in this iteration of the key asks has been elevated. Last time we didn't have the experience we've had with COVID. Yes, it was in the declarations, it wasn't the key asks, but this time we have very, very concrete and very specific actions we want governments to take. And then the milestones that we want, then we use to track progress. And the reason is we now know how essential healthcare workers really are, can be, will be in the future. And they already play in, building health communities, health people and lives. And so we have elevated that. On invest more and invest better, there's nothing we can do without funding. And so really we have strengthened the case for increasing domestic resource mobilization, but also foreign support for aid for global health. And then making sure that this piece on moving together, which is more about accountability and governance, strengthening accountability mechanisms for UHC and making sure that some commitments are made in September around that as well. And then the other change that we have, really big change, is on gender. There's no denying that this is a very central piece of what must happen in order for us to achieve UHC. And so we have boosted that up and have very specific actions we want governments to take. And then last but not least, on connecting universal health coverage and health security. As I said before, these are two intertwined goals. We can't achieve one without the other. What we want to see is a more integrated and holistic approach in both the PPR and UHC that allows us to achieve both goals at the same time. So those are kind of like the 3 main new things that have come out of this set of recommendations. They were there before, but we have kind of like strengthened them more and highlighted them more. And then just to quickly close, once the action agenda is completed, we are hoping to launch it on the 27th of this month, and it will be available in French and English on our website. But we will also make other materials available in more languages: Spanish, Arabic, and Russian. And also we're going to have the resources for social media that we'll share with advocates. And quickly, this is what our timeline looks like. We're going to have the action agenda launched on the 27th, and then we have the World Health Work Week that we plan to engage. It will be, we also obviously have the World TB Day. We are doing some social media messaging development, integrating what Stop TB partnership has developed and aligning that with UHC and making sure we amplify. and then the multi-stakeholder hearing, and obviously the World Health Assembly is another big moment. There will be a G7 summit between there that we are also involved in right now in the campaign. And after that, there's other regional events that are happening that we are part of, including one that is being organized by APCASO in Asia Pacific, and also another one by GFAN this is a GFAN meeting where we're going to be in Nairobi. So that's kind of like the timeline we are looking at going forward. I'll stop there and just highlight that we have some resources. I'll share the website where you can go and read more about our plans for the HLM. I will update this very regularly, and you can have a look at it and have time and some of the resources that you can use in your advocacy. Thank you. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you so much. I think that's really helpful. And if possible, we'd love to get the slides that you've shown today so that we can pop them up on our website for everyone to refer to. And there's just a few comments happening in the chat, but Weisa, I really like the way, the way that you said earlier that we have to have universal health coverage before, during, and after any kind of crisis, because it's not just about being there in a crisis, it's about being there all of the time. And I think that kind of framing could work really well in collaboration with the other HLMs this year as well. So just wanting to open it up for any quick questions at this stage. I see Chris Collins has one and has put something in the chat as well. So Chris, I'll go over to you. And if there's any others who'd like to jump in at this stage, please raise your hand if you can, or indicate in the chat that you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. Chris, go ahead, please.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for this great presentation that really clarified things. And I was really happy to see the themes that you're emphasizing. It just seems great. What I put in the chat is, I was really glad to see that you're talking about the connection between pandemic preparedness and UHC, and this all really comes back to primary healthcare and health systems. I think making those connections is just so important in this HLM. But I'm wondering if there's a way we can also add that the responses to AIDS, TB, and malaria are pathways to UHC, and we need to find those synergies and work with them. But I think if that, emphasizing the AIDS, TB, malaria responses and the relationship to UHC will both help embolden the effort for UHC, but also help keep alive the responses to AIDS, TB, and malaria, and show the interconnectedness. I just wonder what you think about that, and what can I do to kind of be an advocate for that? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And Weisa, I'll just point out that there's just two other comments in the chat that maybe you want to address altogether around community systems and responses in the messaging. And I know we've just seen your top highlights, so maybe you could comment around community systems and responses and how that might fit into the UHC agenda, as well as the use of the health security wording and whether or not there's an opportunity with the high-level meeting being on PPPR to consider, consider different language that is more resonant within the HLMs that are taking place, or if we see that in the detail of your action agenda as opposed to your titles. So I'm not sure, there's a lot there, but Weisa, if you have any quick thoughts on those sort of three issues raised by Chris, and then in the chat as well by Robin and Kana.
So I heard Chris very well. For some reason, Katie didn't come up very clearly, but I'll read the comments after you respond to the first question. So, I've said on this call before that there is no UHC without, coverage. There's no UHC without a strong response to TB, HIV, and malaria. It's just, you cannot achieve it. It's just impossible. And so what we've been saying is we're going to create this action agenda that is inclusive of all, where everybody can come and see themselves in. So a lot of those are not very specific. The 8 actions are not very specific. And by the way, these are still not finalized, so let's not use them as final action areas. But in each of those, TB, HIV, malaria, and other health issues and disease-specific needs will be addressed. And that's kind of like the idea. You can have this very high level, but then within all of those, we want to make sure that everybody, every health issue, every health disease issue is can see itself in that and be able to use this tool to adapt it to their specific asks. It can be at the country level, regional level, whatever, but being so broad enough that all the communities, health communities, can actually utilize this, because we cannot achieve UHC without all of these things done. So that's how we kind of went about developing these 8 areas, was to make sure that they are broad enough for each health area to fit in there. And so, yes, TB, HIV, and malaria are front and center, like any other health issue or disease of the UHC, our UHC agenda that we have developed. There's a question on, I couldn't hear you very well, but let me look in here. Or if you can repeat it.
On community system strengthening, around using that language. Can you hear me, Lisa? Sorry.
Yes,
I'm speaking as loud as I can without yelling.
Yes.
On community system strengthening and just incorporating that, particularly in the context of UHC, often seen as sort of only strengthening formalized healthcare structures, and then also the use of health security as opposed to using the word PPPR, given that there's an HLM on PPPR and you're using health security in your action plan. So,
yeah, actually, our language is more aligned with that. It's more about health security more so than PPPR. But health security in some spaces has been misunderstood, and so sometimes you find yourself needing to kind of like spell out the PPPR. But in general, that's our framing as well. In terms of systems, systems are not one thing. There are many different things that go into our systems. When we talk about health workers, when we talk about some of the innovations that are happening in different disease areas and all of that, these are all part of UX and part of the health systems. And so our language is that, it's very broad in health systems, but we are very aware of what the different pieces that go into that. And the way that the action agenda has been built is to allow for all of these components of health systems to be fit into that framing, and people being able to go and use the action agenda to tailor their specific actions, so specific asks on a specific issue or health area in their advocacy. So this is not, we're not envisioning this being the final tool. This is the beginning. So this is the tool you use, and then tailor yours, whatever you have with when you're doing your advocacy, so that it's all aligned, because we're all doing the same thing, which is health, making sure that everybody has access to the healthcare they need, and that no one is left behind.
That's great. Thank you. And we are kind of tight on time because we do have 2 other HLMs that we want to talk about, but both Joanna and Samantha have had their hands raised. So I'm just going to ask them to pop in with their comments, and we might save answering it till a little bit later, unless it's something very, very specific that Lisa can clarify right now. But if you could pop in, Joanna, and then Samantha with your comments, and then we'll move on to the next HLM. And but there'll still be more opportunities for Q&A going through the rest of the call. Joanna, welcome.
Yes, hi, can you hear me? Yes, hi, hello, this is Joanna. I'm from Unite, which is the Parliamentarians Network for Global Health. I just wanted to pop in and say that we've very proudly and actively been working with UHC 2030 and the task force in the development of the key asks that will be presented at the UN HLM. And I know we'll be going through the other meetings as well, but we just wanted to say that we too are trying to work and prepare a set of key asks, this time from the perspective of parliamentarians and policymakers, to present. And because we've been talking about the connectivity between all of the three topics. This is actually what we will try to do as well. Prepare and submit a statement that will try to link all of the three topics of the HLMs. And of course, we'll be happy to support you in the preparation of all of the other set of key asks as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Samantha?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of second the question on the use of the global health security term. I know that's been historically used in the past, but I think a lot of people are trying to move away from that because it has some racist undertones of trying to secure, the global north from diseases that come from the global south or something. And just for interests of coordination among the HLMs to use the same terms throughout all three of them, I think would be a better move. Thanks.
Thanks, Samantha. I think that's why the issue is raised here. So we'll see how that develops. Lisa, I think, has heard us. And I do see two other hands raised, but we are going to move along or else we're not going to get through our agenda. But Robin and Peter, if you can wait patiently for the next sort of opportunity for discussion. I hope, Waiswa, you're not going anywhere and can stay for the rest of the call. So if there is anything specific for you in the upcoming Q&A, then we can get your insight on that. So I'm going to pass it over to Courtney Howe from StopAge, who's going to brief you on sort of the PPR HLM and efforts to provide coordination among civil society and communities, because it's the first PPR HLM and because there isn't exactly a UN agency that's specifically responsible. There isn't the same kind of setup currently in terms of a community and civil society hub as there is with CSEM for UHC and with GFAN for the TB one. So Courtney, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing the knowledge that you've been gleaning, and Max has come in to say hello, everyone, and the information that you've been gleaning from the many different calls that I've seen you on and organizing to try and bring people together for the conversation. So Courtney, over to you, and thanks again for joining today.
Thanks, Katie, and hi, Max. I'm just going to share my screen. That's okay. Just to go, oh, sorry. It's not going to work. Here we go. Yeah, great. So thanks, Katie. Yeah, just wanted to share a little bit, as you said, the information on the PPR high-level meeting feels a little bit different, and trying to find out kind of what's happening has been a little bit more of a challenge, I guess. So yeah, happy to give a little bit of an update, and I think some questions for the broader group as well of like how we take forward our PPR shared kind of advocacy priorities as well. So yeah, just as a very brief introduction, obviously the PPR high-level meeting approved last September. It is co-chaired by Israel and Morocco, which was also confirmed towards the end of last year. And just a couple of weeks ago, the modalities were approved. As we've already discussed, some of the key dates that are coming up are obviously the multi-stakeholder hearings that are across all three of the high-level meetings. The co-chairs kind of seeing obviously June, July being the key months where the kind of negotiations will take place around the political declaration. And then with the high-level meeting, as we've already discussed, taking place or scheduled at the minute for the 20th of September. And so in terms of the modalities, and we'll share a link to the final document that was published recently, but obviously focusing on sort of further mobilizing the political momentum around PPR and having that kind of multi-sectoral approach. Participation, sort of, I guess, similar with other high-level meetings, focused around sort of member states at the highest possible level, UN agencies and all relevant stakeholders. And we'll come on to discuss a little bit more around sort of civil society participation. With the expected outcome of being the kind of action-oriented political declaration as well. Just to flag, I think on the modalities, there's a couple of pieces that we see in the document as well that they've made sure to include in there, including so this interconnectedness between what I hear in calls referred to as like the Geneva and the New York PPR processes, which is new terminology to me, but I hear this described a lot now. So in particular around sort of the international health regulations, and then the work of the intergovernmental negotiating body on the pandemic accord as well. And again, we'll come back to kind of the links between those pieces as well. highlighting the need for a multi-sectoral and whole of government, whole of society approach, acknowledging the key leadership of the World Health Organization within the UN response, which again, I think is one of the key kind of pieces of where the kind of PPR discussions should sit and how it's kind of split between like the UN and the WHO, especially when we look to like future accountability pieces. And then there's a mention in there, obviously, around the importance of ensuring coordination with the organization on the TB and the UHC high-level meetings, as well as actually forward looking towards the AMR high-level meeting as well. And I've included here, I won't go through this, but just the format of the high-level meeting in September, I think following the kind of structure of others with the opening pieces, the kind of general discussion from member states, the 2 multi-stakeholder panels, and then the closing segment as well. So in terms of sort of links to other processes, I think this is a kind of key thing that keeps coming up within the PPR discussion, because it feels like there's a lot of different things that are moving at the minute. The main ones, obviously, that are described as like the Geneva pieces, being the intergovernmental negotiating body work, as well as the international health regulations and the review of those that's ongoing at the minute. The co-chairs, Israel and Morocco, presented at the recent IMB meeting in Geneva. They had a sort of lunchtime session. I can share this presentation. I've actually put a link to the slides that they presented as well, so I can share that in the chat. But they were very keen to obviously highlight that like they're very committed to ensuring that this high-level meeting complements and supports the IMB and the IHR processes, that they're working closely with like WHO both in Geneva and New York on this. And they were specifically attending the IMB just to make sure that there was a better understanding of some of the key issues that are being discussed. They did mention in that session as well that they were also meeting with WIPO, so on intellectual property, as well as sort of World Trade Organization senior officials. And I understand, I think in their discussion, they also talked about meeting with some civil society organizations as well. Although my understanding was that that wasn't a kind of formal meeting, but maybe just sort of one-to-one discussions with different groups. So interested if any colleagues were at the IMB meeting or in Geneva and have had sort of engagement with the co-chairs around that as well. So yeah, there was a lot of discussion around like making sure the complementarity between the processes. But I think one of the challenges, which was acknowledged by the co-chairs in that presentation as well, was just around this question of equity and how, again, there's a different understanding in New York and Geneva around equity, and whether the kind of discussions at the minute are kind of moving in the Geneva space, but actually it's going to be difficult in the New York space around the high-level meeting, around getting language around equity within these discussions as well. And so I think that piece around equity and whether that kind of features and how it would feature in the high-level meeting will be one of the kind of key areas of focus. Other key areas that featured in a letter which Pandemic Action Network and the Platform for Acte Civil Society and Community Representatives drafted, I think, earlier this year, and signed by many colleagues on this call, highlighted sort of 4 kind of key areas around sort of elevating international action on PPR to a kind of whole of government, whole of society priority, which we see also kind of referenced in the modalities. Driving long-term ownership and accountability for PPR. So there's lots of discussions around accountability mechanisms. So for example, like the independent panel had proposed a Global Health Threats Council at the UN level. And I know WHO also have a proposal around a Global Health Emergency Council. So I think one of the key pieces is going to be what that accountability looks like and where it sits. Is it going to sit within the WHO kind of side, or is it going to be within the kind of broader UN network? And again, really interested to hear colleagues' perspectives on the best place for that to be sitting. And then prioritizing civil society and multi-stakeholder engagement at the earlier stages. So as Katie's mentioned, the PPR doesn't have the same kind of mechanism. We don't have a CSTEM, we don't have a GFAN kind of having that role to kind of really bring together civil society within the PPR piece. I think obviously WHO, I think technically kind of the agency to this, but there hasn't been that kind of process to identify and establish a real civil society engagement mechanism to facilitate like input into these discussions. And we'll again come back to that in the kind of next step session. And as we've already discussed, obviously making sure that there are those links between the high level meetings, that obviously the 3 of them taking place in the same week, making sure that kind of agreed language that we already have are featuring in those 3, and how the kind of cross-cutting pieces are sort of inputting into those 3 meetings. From a StopAIDS perspective, we're working with GMP Plus around a sort of PPR advocacy toolkit, which will include some of the high-level meeting pieces. And my colleagues are also working on briefings across the 3 high-level meetings on the 4 topic areas that I've put on here, and very much open for colleagues who would like to work with StopAIDS colleagues to input and to sort of co-develop those kind of key asks. But there's also a broader piece around sort of, the kind of broader civil society community engagement piece in this high level meeting, given that we don't have that kind of mechanism that we do in other high level meetings. So kind of a next step, but also a question to the group. So like without that formal mechanism, like how can we ensure that civil society and communities are key partners in the high level meeting? So designing the multi-stakeholder hearing on PPR and ensuring that we have civil society community voices sort of at the high level meeting in September. And then again, sort of another question, but there's been lots of sort of discussions, many on the platform for ACT-A side with StopAIDS, GFAN, Wacky Health, as well as other civil society colleagues, including AVAC, for example, around like sort of co-creating a civil society-led space. Like, is there a need, whilst we don't have this formal mechanism, should we kind of create that space so that we can come together to kind of discuss, develop those kind of advocacy asks specific to the PPR, but also making sure that whatever is coming towards the PPR HLM is also linking up with those asks of UHC and TB high level meetings as well. So yeah, would really welcome any thoughts from colleagues on those kind of pieces. And like I said, we've been looking at what that kind of could look like, and would welcome any thoughts on whether that would kind of be a helpful space, because I think even on the UHC discussion we just had, I think some of the kind of key priorities that colleagues are sharing in the chat around like community-led and addressing structural barriers are pieces that we really want to be making sure that we have those key asks and are brought towards the PPR discussion as well. I will finish there, and yeah, I'll put this link into the chat so that you can access the links just to the resolutions, the joint letter that I mentioned, and also the slides that the co-facilitators presented at the IMB meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Courtney. That's really helpful. And those slides that were presented at the IMB meeting are quite useful and give a lot more detail than I think I've found before on the UHC one. So that's really helpful. And if you can share those with us, we'll definitely get them up on our website in relation to this call so that people can access all of those links. So we do want to quickly speak about the TB high level meeting as well in the next few, before we wrap up in 15 minutes, but just opening the floor to any kind of questions or any thoughts around what Courtney was saying at the end there in terms of interest around sort of co-creating and co-facilitating, or, you know, just making it happen, a hub for communities and civil society, I guess, in the absence of it not being something that looks like the organizers aren't necessarily going to be able to provide. So any thoughts around that? Feel free to use the chat. There's quite a good discussion going on there around language at the moment and finding synergies between the 3 high-level meetings on that and key asks. Any other questions or comments? Please feel free to raise your hand if you can find that hand raise function, or just note in the chat that you'd like to come in. Robin. You did wait patiently since the last discussion.
Thanks, Katie. Actually, we've got a great conversation going on in the chat, which is, so I have a different question related around that civil society community hub. I mean, we've seen this in so many places before, like the ACT-A platform, like around, you know, the pandemic fund. Can we not create our own civil society community hub? Might we be able to get some resources for that? And you know, I just think that this is such an important moment in time with these three critical political declarations that are going to come out, that we need to really have a coordinated civil society and community voice. So I think the ideas that are going on in the chat right now are super exciting. But we also need to be very coordinated with a centralized hub across the three. So if there is a possibility to identify funding for that, or, you know, as we did with the startup of the ACT Day civil society platform, do it on a volunteer basis. I think it's really something that is important. Thanks.
Thanks, Robin. Some of us are still like recovering from that volunteer basis platform for ACT Day.
No doubt, no doubt.
Courtney included.
No doubt.
Before I go to Courtney to respond on that, I do see one other hand raised, and I'm sorry, it's hard for me to tell what your name is from what your Zoom name is, but I see you're the ED for EDWACH International. So please introduce yourself and welcome. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Dr. Eke Hudu, Executive Director and Social and Behavior Change Specialist, Empowerment for Vulnerable Women and Children International, Nigeria, Kano specifically. Actually, I just want to say thank you for this particular meeting. It's very important to us as civil society. And we are, on behalf of civil society and myself, we are very happy, and I'm very happy about this meeting. So what I want to say here is, we as civil society, we do a lot in the communities, and we just want us to, you to keep on pushing us through so that we can do more best in the society as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hudu. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate that. It's always nice to hear that the work that we're doing collectively is, has impact and is helpful. And I know that, for the TB and for the UHC one, and I think the hope as well for the PPR one is to provide everyone, regardless of where you are, with some tools that you can use to advocate within your countries around these HLMs to make sure that those key messages are getting out to your decision makers in a way that that will have impact when it's all put together as a whole. So Courtney, did you want to come in on anything that Robin said before I pass it on to the other Robin around the TB high-level meeting?
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Robin. I agree. I think it just at this stage, even if we got WHO and agency to agree, the kind of process to get the kind of formal mechanism actually could just take too much time. And so agree around it being a civil society-led approach. I think with a number of colleagues, we're hoping to meet this week to kind of take that forward, to look how funding could be secured if possible to make that happen. So we'd just encourage anyone who would be interested in connecting on kind of making it work from a civil society perspective to establish that type of mechanism to please get in contact, and I can make sure everyone's connected on that discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Courtney. Really appreciate it. And I think what you're hearing in the chat is, people do feel like it's important to find the central coordinating function, if not, if for nothing else than to give us who are used to working together and used to having those kinds of functions for high-level meetings, a place to go to find out information and collaborate and find ways to collaborate across the HLM. So thanks. And everybody email Courtney if you're interested in keeping up on this. Because we are running a little close on time, I will pass it over to Robin Waite, who has joined GFAN and leading with Priyanka Ayer, the HLM on TB hub work. So Robin, over to you quickly, and we see your screen, so go ahead.
Great, thanks, Katie, and hi, everyone. I hope you're doing really, really great today. Thanks, Quentin, for sharing my screen. If you can go ahead and get all the other content up there, that would be awesome. So the TB HLM is scheduled for September 22nd. Our modalities resolution passed the other week. And as you all know, the multi-stakeholder hearing dates are also now scheduled for May 8th and 9th. All three will be happening over the 2 days, and each has 3 hours in the same format, which you can read on screen now. One thing that I think is important to flag is that there is only one registration form for all three. So if you are registering, and you can register with or without consultative status to the United Nations for this one, make sure that you indicate which hearing you have a preference for speaking at. But I think you can also rank them. So if you put something in, they might slot you in a different one for some reason. But there is one registration form. I also want to flag that apparently the president of the General Assembly is still debating whether or not to include a fourth hearing that integrates all three HLMs or not. And personally, I think it would be a really missed opportunity for our efforts to integrate the issues to not have that fourth hearing. So there is 2 days. Technically, there's space for 4 different HLM sessions. So that might be something that all HLMs coordinate on sooner than later, is maybe sending a letter to the president of the General Assembly together with all our networks crowding in to call for that fourth integrated HLM hearing to happen. Okay, next slide. So this is just a flag that we do have a roadmap of moments and advocacy action laid out for the TB HLM. There's moments at the top, then what you can expect from the hub, and what you as advocates can do to crowd into those advocacy actions at the national and regional levels throughout the year. So I'm not going to read this in detail because you will be able to look at this in your own time afterwards. But the next moment coming up is World TB Day, and that's just on March 24th. So let's take some time on the next slide to dig into what you can expect from the hub and how you as an advocate could crowd into that moment. So yes, we can end TB and make the high-level meeting on TB a success if we all do our part and take strategic actions with ambition and vigor throughout the year. And our first moment to really start our HLM advocacy is going to be on World TB Day. And we need your support taking this action to make that roadmap I just showed you work. So for World TB Day, we want to make everyone know that the HLM on TB is happening, and we want to kickstart the advocacy at national and regional levels. So the hub is going to be launching a global accountability scorecard linking back to the 2018 high-level meeting on HLM and supporting advocates around the world to reach out to their heads of states, target members of parliament, and their representatives to the UN. So we are going to be sending out draft emails for you to engage all those 3 different types of targets. We're going to be asking you to send those emails to those targets. There's ways for you to adapt it to your local context, but really the asks right now are for the head of state to show up to the HLM and to make an ambitious pledge or commitment. It's to ask for a meeting with your MPs and have them support getting the highest level of political representation at the HLM itself. And to our UN reps, it's to get them to have a meeting with us so we can share our asks, and also have them make sure that our country's registering to make a statement. So expect all of that material from us on March 20th, and please do crowd into supporting that action and activity. I think that's all from me right now. Maybe just next slide in terms of how to stay engaged. So we like to work smart, and want to thank the UHC community for doing a lot of the heavy lifting of some of this work up front, but we are looking to what's happening in other spaces so that we're not reinventing the wheel in the TB space. You can find things like guides to the HLM on our landing page right now that'll help you. Check out the UHC landing page. It's also really helpful for general information on high-level meetings. And we are sharing info through different listservs. And I really want to ask every single person on this call, if you're doing anything on any of the HLMs, please share through the GFAN listservs. If you develop a resource, if you have an event, that way we can work smart and leverage resources across our networks and communities and not reinvent the wheels, and also find ways where we can support one another and collaborate more effectively and efficiently. So that's all from me for now.
Thank you, Robin. A lot of information there. And also just a reminder on that landing page that we've shared, there are calls coming up tomorrow, the 9th and the 10th, different sort of time zones depending on where you are. So please do join those for sort of more detail and more information around that. So please, so thank you. Are there any quick questions for Robin around the TB-HLM? Pernilla, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And thanks for all the presentations. I don't know if other countries are in the same situation, but we had a meeting with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and were asked sorry, I'm just going to start my video, to provide inputs, if we had any, for the high-level meeting resolutions, not just TB, but all of them, as soon as possible. And we, of course, would like to use, as you were also discussing in the chat earlier, the same language as other community actors and some of the same asks. I can see for UHC, there are already some asks, and those will be great inputs if we manage to also to provide inputs here. We're focusing our resources on the TB high-level meeting, but still, so I don't know where maybe we are in the process, or in terms of like developing common asks. We'll be happy to contribute as well, of course, but we also want to take them by civil society here in Denmark before they then are provided to the ministry and decision makers. But we have this feeling that we have to move quite fast, and maybe other people have the same in their countries. Thank you.
Yeah. Definitely feeling the time crunch as well. So what I can say on the TB process side of things, there's 2 different key asks opportunities unfolding right now. So the Stop TB partnership, I understand, is going to be launching within the week a public survey consultation on key asks that they've developed with the input of a ton of their partners. So that'll be coming out soon. Just to flag that the hub is supported with funds from Stop TB. So there is alignment there, but we're aligned, we're not always alike. So our work as the hub is very much focused on affected communities and civil society. The asks that they're putting out are a bit more broad in the scope of interest. That being said, Stop TB is also supporting the launch of the Deadly Divide 2.0 report that's anticipated to be published for World TB Day. And that effort is building on the 1.0 effort and past work done in the affected community and civil society space to develop specific community-based asks. So it will be coming out with 6 different areas of action, which will form the foundation of the hubs and our communities start to having asks for the HLM. So the idea for World TB Day and the world roadmap we just shared is we're making our asks for meetings right now with representatives, and by the time those meetings are secured, we will have the Deadly Divide 2.0 asset launched where we can bring those asks into that space. There's also going to be already happening in the TB space. There's lots of regional and national level consultations happening, and regions and nations have been engaged in the development of the Deadly Divide 2.0 report.
Thanks, Robin. I think I just add again that Waisla in his presentation mentioned that the sort of action plan that's coming out from the process, the consultative process earlier this year, is being planned to be launched at the end of March. The 27th, I think, is what I saw. So so this stuff is coming, and I mean, I think governments are always like, you must give it to us immediately, and you must all say the same thing, or it's too confusing for us. So don't be put off by that, right? Like, these things do take time, and CSOs are not always like 100% aligned, and there's good reason for that, right? So but what I heard today is that in terms of language, a few things that would be helpful would be like the best language that we can use across the 3 HLMs and CSOs in terms of terminology around common concepts. Something that tells us the language in the various HLMs on health-related issues that we've already gained as a stepping point and a starting point for these ones, so that we're not fighting for language that we already got in an HIV HLM or in the TB 2018 HLM or whatever it might be. And just in terms of your comments, I think too, we could pull together, as these different pieces are coming, the key messages across the 3 different HLMs from there, so that there's an easy reference point for all of you as advocates to kind of go to, and links for resources that you can get more of those. So I see Waiswa's hand raised. We are over the hour, so I'm just going to let him come in really quickly to add any further information, and then pass it back to Quentin for any final announcements, and then we'll let you guys go for today. But obviously, this is a conversation we need to continue to keep having.
So just to point out that we have been in conversation with Stop TB Partnership with Greg and James about how we move now the next level of co-developing messages, so that we don't have PPR people and TB people and others going to the same officials 3 times, separate times. And so there have been some of those conversations, but we haven't really figured out how to actualize it to move it forward. And so I think a big part of the conversation we need to do is, how do we have the support of the technical leads, which is UH 30, Stop TB Partnership, and also whoever's coordinating the PPPR, to come to give us guidance on how they would like for us to move forward on this piece. I think that for civil society, I think that will be the next step. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Waiswa. Thank everyone for joining us today, for carrying the conversation past the hour. We'll be posting a recording within 2 days. We'll be sharing the presentations of our presenters as well. And thank you a lot for a very lively call and really engaging conversation. Have a great day, have a great afternoon, have a great evening, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, GFAN.
Thank you, and bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.